of our African penguins, and as their name implies, they are penguins that are found in Africa along its southern coast. So contrary to what a lot of people believe, most penguins prefer the warm weather over the cold weather. There are 18 different species of penguins, and only about 4 of them live in the cold all year round. So where these African penguins come from in southern Africa, they can be anywhere between 50 to over 100 degrees, so they will never see snow out in the wild. If you took an African penguin and you stuck them in the middle of Antarctica, they would freeze to death. It would be much too cold for them. So penguins live all over the southern hemisphere, south of the equator.
They're getting fed right there.
You can find them in Africa, Australia, New Zealand, South America, Antarctica, and the Galapagos Islands. However, you will never find them living north of the equator in the wild, which we like to call the imaginary penguin fence. For some reasons, penguins stop at the equator, and you will never find them in the wild north of it. The only way you will ever find a penguin north of the equator is if you visit them in a captive setting, such as in a zoo or an aquarium. Now, even though this time of year you might see commercials by Coca-Cola showing penguins and polar bears hanging out and drinking soda, that's actually not correct, because penguins and polar bears live on opposite sides of the earth, so they will never meet out in the wild. Now, right now we're feeding our penguins a few different things. We usually start off with squid first. They kind of act like squid is broccoli, however. It is very healthy for them, but they are very picky when it comes to their squid. So it's like trying to get your kids to eat their vegetables. Now, the squid is healthy for them, and it has a high water content. The reason why they don't like the squid is not because of the taste, it's actually because of the texture. Penguins don't have taste buds, so they base everything that they eat off of what the texture is like. So most of them are not the biggest fan of the rubbery texture of squid. After we feed out the squid, we'll move on to a fish called capelin, which is what you can see our feeders are feeding out now. So capelin is kind of like the meat and potatoes of our penguins' diets. It provides them with a lot of energy, and it makes up the bulk of what they eat. And the last thing that we give our penguins is a little oily fish called zoo smelt. This is like their dessert. So it's not the healthiest fish for our penguins, but they do really enjoy it. So when we do bring the zoo smelt out for them to eat, you'll see most of our penguins will go nuts over it. However, just like you would wait till after eating a healthier dinner to move on to dessert, we do the same thing with our penguins. So we'll make sure they fill up on the healthier squid and capelin first. And then once they've mostly filled up on the healthier stuff, then we'll give them a little bit of their dessert fish at the end. Now, this is all restaurant quality food that comes to us frozen, and then we thaw it out for our penguins to eat. However, when you freeze seafood, it tends to lose some of its nutritional value. So once a day, we do have to fortify their food with vitamins to make sure our penguins stay happy and healthy. However, they don't really even understand they're getting these vitamins because they swallow their food whole. So they use their beak to grasp onto the fish, and once they get a good grasp, then they'll swallow it. And they can swallow a fish that's as long as the white spot on their belly, as long as it's no wider than their
Sorry.
You're okay. Now you'll notice all of our penguins have bracelets on their wings. This is kind of like their name tag, and it helps us to identify them. If you see the bracelet on the left wing, it means that that penguin is a female, and if you see it on the right wing, it means that that penguin is a male. There's no way to tell the difference between a male or a female penguin just by looking at them. So when we have one hatched at our aquarium, we'll take a little blood sample from their foot, send it to the lab, and then they'll let us know whether we have a male or a female. Once we find out, then we'll put their beads on the appropriate wing. Most of our penguins did hatch here at Jenkinson's Aquarium. The ones that did hatch here will have 3 different bead colors. So they'll have 2 beads that are the same color, and that's that individual penguin's color. So it's like their signature color. When we see that color, it means that penguin. The other 2 beads are their parents' colors, the 3rd bead being the father's and the 4th bead being the mother's. However, not all of our penguins hatched here. We do have some penguins that actually came from different facilities. So these penguins will either have 3 beads that are all the same color or 4 beads that are all the same color. So just by looking at a penguin's beads, you can tell whether they're a male or a female. You can figure out whether they hatched here or at a different facility. You can figure out who their parents are, and you can also try to see if they have any siblings or any offspring of their own. Now we do have a few penguins in this exhibit who look a little bit different from everybody else. We have one penguin who's more of a lighter gray color. She usually likes to hang out on the right side of the exhibit over by the rocks, but she might be coming over to get some food at some point. So her name is Jewel, and she is our oldest penguin. She is 32 years old. African penguins live to about 15 to 18 years in the wild, and they can live to about 30 to 40 years in captivity. The reason why Jewel looks like this is because she had a bit of a molting problem. Every year penguins go through something called a molt, which means that they lose all their feathers and they grow new feathers back in. This process usually takes a few weeks. So they molt every year. However, since Jewel is quite old, it takes a little bit longer for her molting process. So she hasn't molted in quite a while. It's been a few years since she's actually had a successful molt. So the feathers that you do see on Jewel is her downy layer that helps to keep her warm. However, she is missing her black and white waterproof layer. Now just because Jewel looks like this, it doesn't necessarily mean she's unhealthy. She still has a bit of a diet. She loves to eat cake pudding. And she also loves her dessert, the Zusma. She does go swimming in the water, but not quite as much as she used to because she doesn't have her waterproof layer. So penguins need their waterproof layer of feathers to stay dry when they go swimming. So when Jewel goes swimming, because she lacks this layer, it takes a lot longer for her to dry off than the other penguins. So she'll go for a swim maybe about once a week. And towards the middle of our exhibit, you'll see 3 other penguins that look a little bit different from everybody else. They're more of a silvery grayish color rather than black and white. This is because these are our juvenile penguins. So their names are Kai, Lilo, and Stitch. They hatched earlier this year, only about late January, early February. So they're all less than a year old. So they still have their baby feathers right now. However, once they reach about 1.5 years of age, they'll molt and they'll lose those feathers and grow back their adult black and white feathers. Now penguins are considered a species of bird. So just like all other birds, they have beaks, feathers, wings, and lay eggs. However, unlike a lot of bird species, penguins do not fly. There's a few different reasons for why this is the case. One of them being they are simply too fat and heavy. This is because of their bone structure. Now birds that fly have hollow bones that makes them very lightweight, and it allows air to travel through those bones. Penguins, however, have bones that are more similar to ours, so their bones are much more dense and solid. Now because of their bone structure, their bones make them too heavy to fly. So our penguins weigh about 5 to 8 pounds. If you compared that to our parrots upstairs, they're about the same height. However, our parrots weigh only about 2 pounds. Now even though penguins can't fly because they're too fat and heavy, this doesn't bother them because they get all their food from the ocean. So because their bones are much more dense, it allows them to be able to swim very deep in the water in order to catch fish. If penguins didn't have bones like this, they wouldn't be able to dive very deep. They would only pop back up to the surface, kind of like if you see a seagull diving to catch fish. However, even if penguins did have hollow bones, and even if they were able to dive those great depths, the water pressure would actually be too strong for hollow bones to handle and could actually crush them. So even if our penguins don't fly, it's very beneficial for them to have those solid, dense bones. Now the second reason why penguins can't fly is because of their feathers. Their feathers are very, very tiny, but they do have a lot of them. So you'll find about 70 to 100 feathers per square inch on a penguin. So they are covered in tens of thousands of tiny little feathers. However, again, if you compare that to our parrots upstairs, our parrots only have about 6 to 8 feathers per square inch. But our parrots have very long feathers, which enable our parrots to fly. Now, even though their feathers are very tiny, they are still very important for our penguins. They have their downy layer that helps them to keep warm, and they have their waterproof layer which helps them to keep dry. Even though in southern Africa, where these penguins live, it's very warm, the water can still be quite chilly. So they need their feathers to protect themselves when they go swimming in the water to catch their food. Especially since penguins spend about 70% of their time in the water. Now, African penguins are considered an endangered species of penguin. This means that they are in danger of becoming extinct in the near future. There are many different reasons as to why this is the case. One of them is habitat destruction. These penguins live on the same beaches in South Africa that a lot of people like to go to. So coastal development has been pushing them off of their natural habitat. So this means that there is less space for these penguins to live, and they have to resort to nesting out in the open.